So I'm in Jedediah Smith State Park here in the Redwoods, Northern California. Look at this tree behind me. This tree fell down and then said, wait, I'm just gonna grow more trees directly on top. Like, I have never seen such hardy plants in my life. This is ridiculous. And the mosquitoes are really bad too. So we trying to stay strapped for that, but they've already got me twice behind the ears. Somehow they snuck in and got me. But this forest is again enchanting, but we're about to find out. We're headed to an area called the Grove of Titans. When we're talking about these trees, I heard Titans and I was interested. So we about to find out. I might have to put my phone away because around every other corner, there's a biological feat. Yes, it's a science word. Study of life. The way these plants are living and growing is absolutely mind-boggling. Some of the way, like, everything in this area, out of anywhere I've been on this trip, although there's not much views, everything you do see is unique and enchanting. It's just like this massive root coming out. Maybe I'm just weird and it's not as cool as I think. Well, it's as cool as I think. Maybe other people don't think it's as cool, and maybe you can't capture this on camera, so you might be watching this thinking, what's the point, bro? Chill out, it's just a forest. But coming from the piney woods in East Texas, where there's plenty of biodiversity, but the pine trees for the most part are pretty uniform, and these are hardwoods that make our pine trees look like toothpicks. And I guess that's the key factor here. I am blown away by the sheer size and the determination of these trees. They're acting like if I step off the trail, I'm gonna have any impact on this environment. No, one of these plants would swallow me up and eat me if I stepped off this trail. It is not flat. That's another remarkable aspect of this terrain. It's not flat, but these trees are gonna grow straight up regardless, and they're gonna be rooted freaking 100 feet down probably. That's the key. That's their anchor, those roots. Nah, you ain't gotta worry about me stepping off this trail. I'm not getting swallowed up by these ferns. Come on now. It just looked like tentacles coming off. Like, what in the world? Howdy.
Hi.
All right, today I want to tell a story from the Old Testament about a man of God named Nehemiah. I'm going to change positions within the story because these mosquitoes are abhorrent, and if I stay stationary in one area too long, they will completely swarm me. So, just a backstory to go into the Jewish history. It's chronicles, written accounts of the history of the times with kings and their kingdoms. Begin Second Chronicles. And so basically King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon takes over Jerusalem, and he exiles a lot of people, carries out a lot of the gold and treasures within Jerusalem, but he allows Jewish men to reign in place there. And it says Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord his God. He did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke from the mouth of the Lord. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who made him swear by God. He stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning to the Lord, the God of Israel. All the officers of the priest and the people likewise were exceedingly unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations, and they polluted the house of the Lord that he made holy in Jerusalem. So basically, he denied Jeremiah, who was a man of God, who was sent as a prophet to speak and give guidance. He defied King Nebuchadnezzar, who he swore an oath to his God, capital G God, to, and so they're not on the good side of God. The Lord, the God of their fathers, sent persistently to them by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they kept mocking the messengers of God, despising his words and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people, until there was no remedy. So basically, it got so bad, God said, nah, I'm gonna have to do something. And I think the key here, verse 14 of 2 Chronicles chapter 36, it says, all the officers of the priest and the people likewise were exceedingly unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations. And they polluted the house of the Lord that they had made holy in Jerusalem, following the abominations of the nations, meaning doing abominable things from the other nations, the other tribes, right? And we're going to get into what that means. So during this time, society is very tribalistic. And in order to be in a tribe, that means that you subscribe to the rituals of those tribes, which means you worship the gods of those tribes. So basically, the Jews in Jerusalem were subscribing to these foreign gods, these gods of other nations, and performing rituals likewise with them. So in response, verse 17 of chapter 36 of 2 Chronicles, therefore, referring to God, therefore he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion on young man or virgin, old man or aged. He gave them all into his hand, and all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king of his princes, all these brought to Babylon. He brought all of them to Babylon. And they burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned all its palaces with fire and destroyed all its precious vessels. He took into exile in Babylon those who had escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and to his sons until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days that it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So basically, the king of Babylon exiles a lot of people to leave Jerusalem, forces them to leave, loots Jerusalem entirely. And it says that they were their servants until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia, until Persia, the Persian Empire, is established. And we're going to go into that now with the proclamation of Cyrus as we go into the book of Ezra. All right, so chapter 1. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you, all his people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. And let each survivor, in whatever place he sojourns, be assisted by the men of his place with silver and gold, with goods and with beasts, besides freewill offerings for the house of God that is in Jerusalem. So Cyrus proclaims and says, you know what, you guys, you were exiled. I'm allowing y'all to go back to Jerusalem. Whenever President Truman helped build the state of Israel in the 1950s, they referred to him as their Cyrus, right? Because he gave them that home of Jerusalem back, establishing the nation state of Israel. And so Cyrus originally did that in history. And so it follows. Then rose up the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, everyone whose spirit God had stirred to go up to rebuild the house of the Lord that is in Jerusalem. And all who were about them aided them with vessels of silver, with gold, with goods, with beasts, and with costly wares, because all that was freely offered. Cyrus the king also brought out the vessels of the house of the Lord that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed in the house of his gods. Cyrus, king of Persia, brought these out in the charge of Mithredath, the treasurer. So basically, Cyrus not only allows them to go back, he allows them to rebuild the temple so that they can worship their God, the God of Israel, the God of Jerusalem. And he returns all the gold and the treasures that were looted as well, all the vessels, all the holy shrines and things with the Jewish faith that represents capital G God. So Cyrus, team good guy, king of Persia, Now we're going to be getting into Nehemiah's story. So things have not gone so smoothly in Jerusalem in the rebuilding of the temple process, as there were old Jews that never exiled and survived that were established there, and so there's new Jews that are returning, and there's conflict, there's infighting. Basically, Nehemiah, under a new king now, a new king of Persia, King Artaxerxes, Nehemiah works for the king. Nehemiah inquires of the state of Jerusalem because Nehemiah is a Jew. And so it says, "And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken, and its gates are destroyed by fire." So this is Nehemiah chapter 1. Nehemiah finds out about the current state of affairs and realizes it's not good. And so this is his response, beginning in verse 4, chapter 1. "As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen, to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man." Now I was cupbearer to the king. So Nehemiah is the cupbearer for the king, a very important role. He bears the cup that the king drinks from. And so Nehemiah is going to make a request to the king after praying to God. Now, Nehemiah does not just outright plea with the king that he may go back to Jerusalem, but the king senses something, and it begins in chapter 2. "In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence." So Nehemiah basically is saying he's never been in sad spirits around the king. "And the king said to me, Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart." The king knows Nehemiah well enough to say, "Hey, you're not yourself. Your heart is troubled. You're not sick. What's the problem?" And Nehemiah says, "Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad, when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" Then the king said to me, "What are you requesting?" So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it." And the king said to me, which the queen was sitting beside him, "How long will you be gone, and when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy." And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. So not only does Nehemiah's request get granted by the king, but he gets the official documents he needs to pass through, and he gets full support from the king to use the forest for support of the buildings. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of Nehemiah's work. So basically, Nehemiah gets to work directing, managing the operations that are going on with rebuilding the temple, and he's going to hold the people accountable. And he realizes that there's oppression of the poor. So in Nehemiah chapter 4 or chapter 5, it says, "Now there arose a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, with our sons and our daughters we are many, so let us get grain, that we may eat and keep alive. There were also those who said, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses to get grain because of the famine. And there were also those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers, our children are as their children. Yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved. But it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards. So basically, these people are in a tough situation to be able to pay the king's tax, and they are selling themselves into slavery. I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words. I took counsel with myself, and I brought charges against the nobles and the officials, and I said to them, you are exacting interest, each from his brother. And I held a great assembly against them, and said to them, we, as far as we are able, have bought back our Jewish brothers who have been sold to the nations. But you even sell your brothers that they may be sold to us. They were silent and could not find a word to say. So basically, he calls them out and says, y'all are just selling your own people back into slavery because you're being greedy. They're speechless because they know it's true. So I said, the thing that you are doing is not good. Ought you not to walk in the fear of our God to prevent the taunts of the nations, our enemies? Moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. Let us abandon this exacting of interest. Return to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive orchards, and their houses, and the percentage of money, grain, wine, and oil that you have been exacting from them. Then they said, we will restore these and require nothing from them. We will do as you say. And I called the priests and made them swear to do as they had promised. I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out every man from his house and from his labor who does not keep this promise. So may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen, and praised the Lord. And the people did as they promised. So this highlights the theme of the tendency for religious officials, the concept of religion and the hierarchy of people superior being able to take advantage of those inferior. And here they're exacting interest on loans so that people can simply survive. And Nehemiah shuts that down, and the people listen. All right, well, Nehemiah is not just a leader who speaks, he truly leads by example. Chapter 5, verse 14. Moreover, from this time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people, and took from them for their daily ration 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants lorded it over the people. But I did not do so, because of the fear of God. I also preserved in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now, what was prepared at my expense for each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep and birds. In every 10 days, all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all this, I did not demand the food allowance of the governor, because the service was too heavy on this people. Remember for my good, O my God, all that I have done for this people. So Nehemiah is being generous with his funds. He does not take the allowance that the governor is allowed, and instead wants to be generous with his stuff. He doesn't want to be a burden to his people. He is a man of God. Things go well for Nehemiah. He gets things rebuilt. Everything gets settled down. But Nehemiah is not satisfied. The people are still doing wrong. This is kind of the closing of the book of Nehemiah. Chapter 13, verse 23. In those days I also saw the Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. In other words, Jews were marrying people of other tribes, foreigners. And half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and they could not speak the language of Judah, but only the language of each people. And I confronted them and cursed them and beat some of them and pulled out their hair. And I made them take an oath in the name of God, saying, You shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons or for yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account? So basically he's saying, don't marry these other people. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, different tribes worship different gods. For a lot of men throughout history, the weakness of them have been women. And women are going to have an influence on them. And their gods and their rituals are going to come with that lifestyle once you get married. And so they're going to be influenced by other gods other than Yahweh. And he follows up with saying, did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account of such women, of foreign women? King Solomon, the wisest, even he himself fell into sin as he started marrying foreigners, because that came with those foreign gods, those rituals that were abhorrent to God. They were abominations. Among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you and do all this great evil and act treacherously against our God by marrying foreign women? So this is an important, the context of this is, if you marry foreign women, you are going to stumble. You are going to start doing things in your life that you otherwise wouldn't if you were married to a Jewish woman of the Jewish faith. This can be applied in today's context of whoever you marry, and really just whoever you surround yourself with is going to have an influence on you. And so if they're not righteous, they're going to lead you into stumbling. Nehemiah, he came and he did his job. He helped rebuild the temple. He gave his own blood, his own resources. He fought through corruption of the people who wanted to stop the building. Ultimately, he's team good guy. Nehemiah, I love that story in the Bible. So there you guys go. I hope you appreciate me getting up in this tree. I appreciated it. It's pretty cool up here. Top 3 things that a guy should avoid doing at all costs. Number 1, don't get a girlfriend. A girlfriend gets you. Number 2, don't wash your hands after peeing. If you do, you might as well just use the ladies' restroom and sit down to pee. And number 3, appear from a position of weakness, present yourself as lower, and then strike from a position of power. Do not let your girl outside the house. If you let her outside the house, then she's going to start wanting other freedoms, like dressing nicely, like wearing makeup, like speaking freely, things of that matter. Psalm 23, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Romans 1:16. The righteous shall live by faith. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God.